Followed yesterday's session, we talked about containers, right? So we talked about containers. Containers are important to run your MVC classes. Either you go with servlets or EJBs or the servlet frameworks like Struts, Spring, JSF. Containers are important in our daily life. Containers are important to run the backend code. Containers are important to run the backend code. Without container, you cannot imagine. Without container, you can't imagine any object. Usually in core Java, we learned that we can create objects by using new keyword. But when you implement basically MVC applications using servlets or EJBs or with Spring or Struts, any framework, during MVC implementations, you never entertain with the new keyword. You will never get much opportunities to use new keyword. So you should not create object, or even if you create object also, that should be given to container. You should not handle it on your own. You need to submit it to container end of the day. Container will take care of your objects. Even if you create it also, you should submit it to container. Without container, you should not deal with your objects. That realization you will get, okay? Don't confuse otherwise. So without containers, we can't have any backend applications. We will not have any backend applications. So in case of servlets, we were using Tomcat as a container. It will create objects for servlets. For EJBs, we are using EJB container like WebLogic JBoss. They create EJB objects. Then what about Spring? Who create objects for your Spring implementations? If I choose Spring as a framework here for my application, who create objects for your Spring classes? If I choose Spring MVC for controllers, Spring transactions AOP for business classes, Spring JDBC or ORM for my DAO classes, that is what we implement in the backend, right? Controllers, services, DAOs. So if I choose this tag, who create objects for my classes? Do I create or do container create? So the container will create your Spring objects. Container will create your Spring objects. So what kind of containers we have? We have one core container, we have one J2EE container, and we have one web container. This container's job, first job that you need to remember is, strongly you should remember is, they will create objects. They will create objects for you. Which objects? Your controllers objects, your services objects, your DO objects. Apart from this, if you have if you have any miscellaneous or utility classes, any extra classes, any object that you are dealing in your application should be managed by your container. Why? Yesterday I was talking a simple scenario. If I have 50 classes in my backend, let's say you have implemented your application, you have your startup, you want to sell books online, so you implemented books online store. There you are taking orders and you are saving your books. After order, you are taking the order address and you are delivering book via post something. So you want to maintain this entire system. For that, I have implemented 50 classes. For online bookstore, I have implemented 50 classes. So for that 50 classes, so your expected students count per month, if it is 20 lakhs, 20 lakhs into 50, the number went to up to 2 into 5, 10, up to 10 crores. Correct? Yeah. So 10 crores objects it will create if you don't choose any framework. If you write on your own with prototype objects by using new keywords. If you design your system without using any framework or without following best practices, if you design your system, if you design your system without following best practices or any framework, framework will follow practices. If you follow framework means you are following all the best practices. Without framework, if you are dealing on your own and if you are writing everywhere new keywords and every request new objects if you are creating, so then as I said 20 into 50 classes, 10 crore objects will be launched into your RAM. End of the day, all these objects need to be created into your physical memory, RAM. So if you have very small amount server, a small server if you have with 20 GB RAM, 200 GB SSD, let me show you. Let me show you why I am telling that as well. GoDaddy. I have GoDaddy account. How many of you have Go domains? Let me log in. Yeah, it logged into my account, my domains, hostings. So if you go to hostings, it is showing VPS hosting. A Linux server it will provide. Linux server I want. So when I want to purchase, see the pricing it is giving. One CPU it will provide with the 2 GB RAM. That's it. 40 GB NVM SSD storage. SSD is fast storage, right? If you have HDD hard disk, that will be very slow. You may improve to SSD. So SSD it is providing in server with 50 GB, 2 GB RAM, 1 CPU, and the price is per month 600 rupees, 699 with the GST and all. It may go up to 800. If you have very small application in terms, let's say like online, bookstore application, if you want to implement, and if users count is as I said, right, you are getting 10 crores users request you are getting. If you create a prototype application, which means without best rules or practices, without using containers, if you create on your own and if you rupture your application with new keyword without any best practices, if you implement, end of the day it is going to create this many objects, and to deal that many objects I need this much memory. Do you have that much memory here? No. 2 GB RAM. If you go to that much memory, see, is there any opportunity they given? No. The maximum they give 16 GB RAM. Why? Does GoDaddy people don't know about the large scale applications? They know. So still they are believing that 16 GB is sufficient for that large scale. Then my application is smaller one. I'm thinking about 500 GB. But for large scale itself, they are providing 16 GB. How they will manage? So if you don't follow rules, your application will not find any server. Maybe you need to visit AWS. There you need to pay monthly 2 lakhs, 3 lakhs bill. Your income expectation is 50,000 and you are spending 3 4 lakhs on servers. Is that suitable scenario for you, or maybe for any startup or for any real time applications? No. So you should create, or you should be better using your RAM. You have 8 GB RAM. That also still huge. With my comparison, earlier I thought to deploy my applications into this 699 itself with the 2 GB RAM. So it all depends on how better you manage your objects. If you create prototype objects, you can't find servers to deploy. So you better maintain all your objects, particularly talking about backend, your controllers or service classes, DAO classes or util classes or any configuration classes, whichever you write. a backend Java class. Rethink about it. If you are using new keyword, shall I use this or not? Remember this memory and phrases, so that you will be very cautious while using new keyword. Don't put new keyword anywhere and don't try to create prototype objects. Prototype objects will eat a lot of memory, because for every request it need to create an object. You suggested to create prototype, then where it will go? It will create it. So how I can ensure my application classes are singletons, only one object creating for entire life cycle? You need not to struggle for it. Just configure your class. Writing this class is also not difficult in Spring. What they are saying is, write your class with your required methods and constructors and put whatever variables you want. Just to focus on your code. Just focus on your use case. So you are implementing online bookstore, implement online bookstore classes. Whichever classes you want. Class, order books class I want to implement. Let's implement it. So what all methods you want? I want to create books. Let's put that method. I want to update books. Let's put that method. I want to delete a book. Let's keep it. I want to keep a order book. Let's keep it. Cancel order. Let's keep it. These are all my business methods. So I want to create this many methods and in my post. Let's write them. And from here I want to do CRUD operations. Let's do it. But don't write that CRUD operation code here itself. So if it is your service class, have one more helper class and call that helper class methods. Maybe you create one more order book DAO class, one more poser class for your CRUD operations. DAO for CRUD operations. So here you may have your JDBC code. Follow best practices with your core Java knowledge itself. And keep this order book DAO here itself as a dependency. And this object container will create. Every object will be created by your IOC container. This object, whatever classes you write. So what Spring is saying, just focus on your code. Just focus on your code. Implement your code. That's it. I will create objects for you. This class object will be created by your IOC container, and this class object also will be created your IOC container. And wherever you need this object as a dependency, this objects also will be exchanged between your classes by IOC only. That is what we call dependency injection. But don't don't rethink about it now. Okay, we will talk about dependency injection later. But now at least this objects creation, who take care of objects creation of your DAO classes or controller classes or service classes? Your IOC container. How many IOC containers you have? A core container, J2EE container and web container. What we will use in real time? In real time for web applications we will use web application context. It will create objects for you in real time. 99.99 applications will be used web application context. If your application is standalone, not a web, you don't have web interface, you have standalone single mission application, there also I want to use Spring. Or I have network of applications connected each other, intranet applications. There I don't want web interface. In that scenario, also go with this web application context. Okay, for any standalone or any intranet, you can go with this web application context. For web applications internally, it will use web application context. Web application context it will use. Can't I use application context? You can use. If you have any requirement, even this web app case also, you can use this application context. Along with this web application context, you can use both combinations also. Nobody stops you. Once you understand the complete picture, right, you can play with them. If you know how to bat, how to ball, then it's up to you how to ball, swing ball or in swing, out swing or spin, or you want to bat. You want to crack 6 or 4, it's up to you. Just you need to learn basics first. So thereafter you can play with them. So the container's main duty is you should use containers to create your objects. Why? Because if you don't use containers, if you create on your own, they will eat unnecessarily lot of memory. That is the only reason. And not only that, if you want to add flavors, if you want to add some more beauty to your application, if container is creating object, if container is creating object, container will add all that benefits. That means, let's say these all are citizens. Controller is one citizen of Indian citizen. Let's say name it. His name is controller. His name is service. His name is Diego, and util config. I have 5 citizens here. So each have a different category. One is middle class. One is poor. One is paying very high taxes. But they all will be connected with the Indian system with their Aadhaar card. So Aadhaar is the container. So we as a person will exist via Aadhaar. We all connected with the Aadhaar system. Now if government wants to apply or give the schemes to you, so consider controller is poor or util is the poor one. So for this poor util, I want to give some pension every month. As we all connected with Aadhaar, government will check or government will put condition who all having who are all having income less than 10,000 per month, give help them with paying 2k additional. I'll deposit into their bank accounts. How government is dealing on the fly? They don't need to visit each one of you. They can directly get your information via Aadhaar. We all connected with Aadhaar. So anything now government is applying so many schemes, right? They are depositing amount to the farmers also, who is having 2 acres or 3 acres of farming. For them, they are helping out with some amount, a little amount. They are not going to each farmer and inquiring it. They have all the data via Aadhaar, everything connected with Aadhaar. So using Aadhaar, they are doing things on the fly. Aadhaar information is sufficient to them to access their bank accounts, to access their properties details, to know their income, to know their age, their income, everything. They will monitor via Aadhaar. So via Aadhaar, they will get to understand who is poor, who is rich, who needs help, who doesn't needs help. So everything will understand via Aadhaar so that they can apply whatever features, whatever things, whatever helps they want to provide, they can help. Similar way, when you use a container for your application, when you use a container for your application, you are writing controllers, service classes, DO classes, not only creating objects, your utility classes, configuration classes, whatever you write. All these classes we will be configuring via IOC. Your controllers, services, DAOs. Don't struggle too much, guys, if you don't understand it. Okay, just focus why I'm giving this topic or comparing with other. Just remember the very few things. Don't stretch too much and try to understand technically. Okay, so the conclusion you will get anyway later. Util and configurations. Okay, I have this many categories of classes in my application. All these classes I'll be configuring it into XML file. And the writing style, right? This classes writing style is poses only. Simple poser we are talking about from the day one. Simple poser classes. Poser means simple Java class. Simple Java class style is enough. Do we have any other styles? You may ask curiously. If you are not coming from servlet background. In servlets, we don't implement controllers like a poser. We implement that class like a extending from a generic servlet or HTTP servlet, and we will override a mandatory method do get, do post or service methods. Servlets will restrict you. They will put pressure on you, extend my class. Without extending your class won't to become a controller. They will force you to extend or put at the rate servlet annotation, something. Earlier we used to extend it. We used to extend HTTP servlet. We used to override methods. Compulsory it will force you. As soon as I extend generic servlet, it will force you implement my service method. So I need to implement that service method. As soon as I use any frameworks which are like in struts also, when I use struts, struts will say, hey man, implement action class, action form classes. Otherwise, I will not work. Servlets also will say, extend my generic servlet or HTTP servlet. Otherwise, I don't work for you. So they will unnecessarily put force on us to implement their APIs. Whereas Spring will never say implement my class. Spring will say implement your classes on your own, whatever way you want to implement. Your business methods, your DO methods, service methods. If you need any help, ask me, I will help you. If you need any help, on the fly it will come and help you. Like how via Aadhaar government helping us. You need to implement simple poser classes. Sorry, you need to write your classes like simple poser classes means pure Java classes. That's it. You follow all best practices which you have in Java, OOPS concepts, or exception handling, IO, I mean, whatever you want to use. Collections, you can use them to implement your classes. If you know core Java, that is sufficient to implement your controller, service, DAO, little bit JDBC knowledge here. All these classes you can implement. End of the day, you need to configure these classes into XML. We have two concepts basically. You can configure them in XML or via annotations also we can deal. With XML, with no XML also we can configure them. There are two ways. Okay, just we are talking about XML only now. You need to configure them into XML. Finally, this XML need to be loaded into your IOC container, which is coming as a jar distribution. You need to load this XML into IOC container, and name of that IOC container is bean factory or application context or web application context. Okay, we will use application context for many of the examples until we reach web application. Okay, web application application context we will use. So as soon as I load this into IOC, if it is a bean factory, if you are using bean factory, which is very core container, right? As I said, bean factory, which is core container. If you use bean factory here as a IOC container, nobody will use it, but just for interviews, like in interviews they will ask, though they are not using. So if you use bean factory core container here as a IOC container, if you use bean factory to load your XML, as soon as you start your application, if it is inside main method, okay. So as soon as you start this main method, bean factory will not do anything. Just it will validate this XML file. It will read XML and silently it will sit. It won't create controller service DAO util config objects. When you start, it will not create until unless you request for a object. If you ask bean factory dot, you need to ask for a bean via get bean method. Either with ID or class name, you need to ask it. You need to ask here. You need to ask here by giving that bean ID. If the controller ID you need to give and ask. Until unless you ask for controller, it will not create any object. Okay, I asked for controller. Will it create object? For sure. As soon as you ask for controller, it will create object. One object will be created into your JVM. End of the day, all will go to JVM only. Okay. End of the day, one object is created. Will it create one more object if I ask for factory.getBean controller? No. It will say, no, no, I don't create object. I'll provide you the existing object. When I call first time, it will create object. When I call first time, it will create object. When I call it again, here it will not create object. Same object, it will refer to you. It will give the same object because by default, it will follow singleton practice. By default, every container will follow the singleton practice only. Any container prefers singletons. They prefer singleton. So your bean factory will prefer singleton only. First request only it will create object. Not at during loading time. Not at when you start your server. It will create when you request first time. Next time onwards it will not create object. Same story with service DAO util config. As soon as you call factory.getBean service object or DAO object, util object, config object first time, it will create object. What about the next request for the same object? No. Already object is there, that object only it will give it to you. Do I need to worry about that object? Nothing. Confidently you can use singleton objects. I'll tell you more in depth what you need to follow in singleton classes. As a developer, how careful you should be while writing these classes. Okay? Yeah. So otherwise singleton objects are safe. You can use singleton objects. In case of bean factory will not create object until you call first time. Bean factory core container will not create object until you request first time. Until you request first time, it won't create any object. Is it? Yes. This is the thing with the bean factory. What if I use application context here? If I use in the same place application context as a container, the J2EE container, if I use, what it will do inside main method if I have this, and when I start my main method, as soon as you start your application, at line number 1 itself, where you are creating application context object, there itself it will create all the objects, controller, service, DAO, util, config, every object it will create as soon as you start your server. All the objects. Bean factory will wait for your first request, whereas application context will not wait. As soon as you start your application, it will create all the objects. Why? Application context knows that you implemented these classes for a purpose only. It knows that it need to create all the objects. If not now, at least at the time of first user request. Application context is thinking why I should wait until first user request. Why I should wait until first user request? If I create it now itself, when first user request, comfortably I can share that objects to him. Why should wait until his request? If I wait until his request, I need to spend lot of time again to create objects. So will that first user wait in a queue? No. Every user is having, you know, every user operation need to be finished in within very less time. Either he is the first user or second user. I don't even want to wait first user for objects creation. So application context, the J2EE container will create object during loading time only. This is the right way. During loading time only you should create objects. This is the right way. You should not make user wait when he first request. You should create objects during loading time only. Do you have any doubt here? Why only loading time? Can't I create on his first request? I recommend, if you came across at first request only, I will recommend, tell me why. I'll give you, the reasonable answer why you need to create during loading time. So why I recommend during loading time itself create all the objects. When basically you will start application during production. I purchased a server, some 699 server I purchased, and I developed my application. I deployed my code. Consider you are using Bean Factory there. I deployed my code. Bean Factory will not create any objects. As soon as you deploy, it will not create any objects. So I am waiting for the customers. So I asked Dikshit or Sai or Tushar to access my application and book. I mean, order a book or book a book, order a book from my application. So he requested first. Dikshit requested. Then, as I am using Bean Factory there, for Dikshit, it started creating controller, it started creating service, it started creating DAO. Somewhere it got failed while getting connection from database. It failed. I didn't realize that during my deployment time. I deployed it, but I didn't realize because objects not created during deployment time. I chose the Bean Factory confidently, so the Bean Factory will wait for first user request. So Dikshit is the first user, so then he is the first person who will see the exception. If he don't report that to me, generally why customers will report to business? They don't. They will see and they will think that okay, this application is not at all good. Let's buy book from another website. So I don't even my application is working fine or not until unless I put notifications or any email exception something. So do I need to really face that situation? I'll be losing my business, right? Why should I? If I would have chosen the application context, what it have done in my server, wherever I purchased, in my server during deployment itself, it used to run all the classes, all the objects. If there are any errors during deployment itself, it will show to me. So that at least I can understand why that exceptions are happening and I can fix and I may redeploy it. At least I may do one round of testing also, at least to ensure application is working fine or not. So which one you recommend, Bean Factory or application context? Obviously application context, because if there are any problems during deployment itself, I can understand and I can fix them so that I may not lose my business. So that's why Spring is using application context only. Even for web applications, while you are using web application context, same story. Web application context will create object as soon as you load your XML. These both are same eager containers. They will create objects as soon as you start. Whereas Bean Factory is a lazy container. It will create object on first request. Let me open Eclipse and see the difference. And about singleton and prototype, we will talk tomorrow. Okay, already I explained you here, but just to make sure everyone will understand that why singleton is sufficient. Okay, one more time we will discuss it. Okay. Hmm. So yesterday we saw example with the Bean Factory. So I have one controller, order controller, Kali single class, e-store. So in my e-store I have only one controller, order controller, and I configured that order controller in Spring XML file. Scope by default singleton, you need not to configure it. Let me remove, don't bother about it. So if I use bean factory here, so bean factory will create at the time of first user request. So when I am ordering for, as I said right yesterday, if I order for milk, if it is like a Swiggy application, so this order controller object will be created at first user request. So if I wake up in the morning, I need to wake up to create others objects. Is that my duty? No. But if you choose bean factory kind of container, that is your duty. Object will be created by you first. For others, same object it will be served. Same object will be given. Okay. So even if you want to see whether that all objects are equal or not, you can see order 1 object is equal to order 2 object is equal to order 3. If I compare them, 3 objects are equal. And let me run it in debug mode, see in which point the object will be created, at line number 16 or line number 12. Line number 12 is already executed, but I don't see my constructor executed. So go to next line. Okay, line number 16 is executed, order controller object created. And now Dixit came, he is requesting for the order controller to order pen. For him, no new object created. If you see here, no constructor executed again. But he received a object. Which object he received? Whatever object created for Naveen, the same object he received. Unnecessarily, container will not create one more object. And Akash requested for book, for him also same object given. So that you can observe from this constructor. Constructor executed only one time for Naveen. Now when I compare, Naveen object and Dixit object is same, true. Naveen object and Akash object also same, true. Means one object only it created, not many objects. That is the proof. But as I said, right, core container will not create until the object you request. Now if I use in place of it, if I use J2EE container, J2E container, if I use. If you don't know about containers, he will follow this old approach, new keywords. This is not at all recommended. Don't ever use. If you use somewhere new keyword, rethink about it. So now here I'll use application context. Application context, new class path, XML application context. Load your XML here. Bus. Now see, I'll put it in debug mode. Debug as Java application until it is reaching. Oh, my line number 14 is executed and controller object is created before even Navin requested. Before I wake up and order for the milk, during deployments itself, the people created this object. And when I request, no new object, same object whichever created during deployment time, that is given to me. Same object will be given to Dikshit. Same object will be given to Akash. Now, three objects are equal. The only difference you see between application context and Bean Factory is Bean Factory is creating object at first user request, whereas application context is creating object during loading time. So this practice only we follow. Okay. So initially when they designed, they came up with this, but nobody is used it. Okay. We use application context only. This will create objects during loading time only. Okay. So tomorrow we will talk about why they made them singleton. Don't I have any problem? Same object given to Naveen. If Naveen do something with this, maybe same parameters I may get here. If Dikshit will do something with this, maybe same parameters I may get here. So that confusion will be solved. Okay, we will talk tomorrow why singletons are sufficient. Then we will go with the next concepts. Is it clear so far? Is it clear? Okay. Yeah. So concepts are simple going forward. Maybe first few sessions only, I'll make you struggle to. I mean, I'll ask you to struggle to understand at least first very few sessions, 4 5 sessions. Thereafter you'll enjoy. Okay. So otherwise, if I don't do discussion here, you'll be having these doubts for lifelong. So just struggle for 1 2 days. Okay. Later sessions will go smoothly. One by one, I'll take you through examples. Okay. Yeah. Just go with this recording again. Example I'll provide. Examples I will upload. So I'll ask my person to upload examples as well. Otherwise, you have all the examples in this link itself. Okay, please go through this link itself, and the session will start by 7:30 only. Okay, so go through this link. Here you have all the examples. So download jars from this first link, and first example, second example, third example. If you are really want to run, download them and practice. Notes I will share it with you. Okay, notes also I'll share. Yeah.